Have you ever tried to build a business between flare-ups? To climb the career ladder while your body is begging you to lie down? What does success look like when your ambition has to coexist with chronic illness? Welcome to Chronic Boss Unfiltered, the podcast where ambition meets women's health. I'm Lilly Stairs, and I've built 2 businesses while managing 3 autoimmune conditions. Each week, I sit down with powerhouse women, entrepreneurs, leaders, and changemakers who are building the career of their dreams while navigating chronic conditions. Together, we'll help you dream big while prioritizing your health. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories from the hospital bed to the boardroom. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Chronic Boss Unfiltered. I'm your host, Lilly Stairs, and today I am joined by the phenomenal Priyanka Jain. She is the co-founder and CEO of Evvy, the company that is revolutionizing vaginal health through science and data. She has been named to Forbes 30 Under 30. She's raised millions to close the gender health gap, and she's built the world's largest data set on the vaginal microbiome. Priyanka's drive for this work comes from her own frustrating experiences being dismissed in the doctor's office, something that many of us can relate to here at Chronic Boss. So Priyanka, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was far too kind of an introduction. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited. And I have to, so typically what I would do with an episode is I would pass it over to you initially to just talk a little bit more about you and your background, but I'm actually going to flip it a little bit today, and I'm going to get personal for a moment to talk about why I really wanted you to be here and for us to have this conversation on vaginal health. I have really personally struggled with vaginal health and bladder health, which we know a lot of those are interconnected. About 15 years ago, I started experiencing recurrent UTIs after sex, and it required me to take a prophylactic antibiotic every time I was having sex so that I wouldn't get a UTI. The doctors didn't have answers beyond that, and we do think that there's some sort of link to the vaginal microbiome. I was experiencing as well recurrent infections. And so what happens is, and I know this is like, you're hearing about this all the time in the work that you do, I have always been so open about my health conditions that this is something I share. I'll talk about it in my friend circles with other people without fail. There will always be another woman who says, oh my God, I have recurrent BV, or oh my God, I have recurrent yeast infections, or I deal with UTIs. And it's just like all of us. There are so many of us, but we're not talking about it. And I want to just talk about this number. When I was doing research for the podcast, I couldn't believe it. 30% of women at any given time are dealing with a vaginal infection.
Yes.
And yet we're more likely to be misdiagnosed than correctly diagnosed. So
You're stealing all my stats, girl. I totally agree. No.
I don't mean to steal your thunder. There's so much else for you to talk about, but I'm so like, why do you think something so common is still treated as taboo? Why is it so hard to say the word vagina? Tell me what you're doing to work on this and fix it.
Well, I so appreciate you being willing to share your story. I'm sure so many people listening can very much relate to the experience you described. And I think just to put some numbers behind it, actually, vaginal discomfort is the leading reason that women seek healthcare advice in the US. I think there's over 10 million doctor's visits a year for vaginitis. And that's obviously so many of us deal with it without even going to the doctor, which points to the fact that you mentioned, which is that 30% of women at any given time have at least one vaginal infection. So incredibly prevalent. And as you said, when we go to the doctor, we're more likely to be misdiagnosed than correctly diagnosed, and we're more likely not to get better than we are to get better. So just mind-blowing and infuriating in so many ways. But I think it all comes back to something you and I have talked plenty about over the past few months, which is around just the lack of research that exists on the female body, right? And just to ground us in reality, women in the US were not in clinical research until 1993. And to this day, women are on average diagnosed 4 years later than men across over 700 of the same diseases, right? And what that really points to is just this massive misunderstanding of what health and disease look like when the person you're talking about has a female body, right? We've essentially studied middle-aged, mid-sized white men, figured out what was predictive of health and disease in that population, and then made the ranges smaller, assumed women were small men, and assumed we had healthcare for women, right? And I think as you and I know, as well as your amazing community, that is not the case. And there are so many unique challenges that women face, and frankly, a lot of the same challenges where our bodies are just giving off different signals, right? Our bodies are telling us when things are going well and when they're not, but we're just not, we don't have the tools to actually measure and track those signals. And so that was very much what we wanted to focus on at Evvy. And that is exactly what underpins the fact that we don't understand vaginal infections, right? I think you and I could also go on a rant about how so many conditions in women's health are defined so broadly that you actually cannot develop good diagnostics and treatments for them because they're actually like 50 different diseases, right? And I think vaginal health is a perfect example of that, where bacterial vaginosis, we see that as over 80 different permutations, right? Where there's different molecular signatures that cluster with different symptoms that are different for women who are in menopause versus postpartum versus on a certain birth control. But in women's health, since we've never studied those things, we just group them all together. And then it's unsurprising that you can't develop diagnostics and therapeutics for something that's actually 50 different things. So anyways, I think that's very much where the problem comes from. And last thing I'll say that I think is very relevant to your community is that 80% of autoimmune disease patients are also women. And I think so much of that similarly comes back to the lack of research, the lack of ability to correctly stratify these different diseases and conditions to then help us get to diagnostics and treatments. So it's all frustrating.
Absolutely. And this is anecdotal. I can't speak to this from a scientific perspective, but just in the conversations we have in our community, there is absolutely a high prevalence of women who are navigating vaginal health issues in addition to their autoimmune disease. And does that connect back to medicine? Does that connect back to the inflammation in their body? What is that related to? We don't know. We don't have the answers, but it is just another thing on their list that they are managing. Yeah.
And just yes, I think that we always say at Evvy, the female body shouldn't be a medical mystery. And the reason we have to say that is because today it very much feels like it is.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us, just so that the audience level set with us, what exactly are you doing at Evvy?
What a great question. So our focus at Evvy is on, as you mentioned, specifically leveraging the vaginal microbiome to help improve outcomes in women's health. We see the vaginal microbiome as one of those highly useful but highly under-leveraged biomarkers when it comes to health and disease in women. And basically, our platform today has two key components. One is that we have the vaginal health test, which is the first time that patients and doctors can get a test that actually helps you figure out what's going on. Instead of pointing to one or two bacteria or smelling swabs or counting shapes under the microscope, all of which are literally the standard of care for the number one reason women go to the doctor. Instead, we do metagenomic sequencing, where we look at the whole genome of all the bacteria and fungi in the sample, and we help doctors and patients finally, what we say, turn the lights on and get a sense of what's actually going on so that you can give a patient the right diagnosis and the right treatment. And so that's the first piece. The second piece of the platform is actually using that data to much more precisely stratify the disease state. So like I was saying before, it's not all BV, it's a much more precise stratification of that. And then we use that to predict the right treatments and ingredients for that specific patient. And then we are able to actually prescribe custom compounded vaginal suppositories with exactly what that patient needs and send them to their door. So basically, precision vaginal health is the goal of the platform.
It's so incredible and so groundbreaking. And I'm so delighted that you are working in this space because we need this innovation. So exciting to have you in it.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. And I think vaginal health is obviously the first place to start with the vaginal microbiome. But I think what excites me so much about it, I'm sure people are familiar with the concept of a microbiome, right? We have one in our guts, we have one in our mouths, on our skin. It's really just a fancy word for a community of bacteria, fungi, viruses, you name it, that live on or in some part of your body, right? And it turns out that we've evolved with a microbiome in our vaginas. And if you think about the vagina structurally, right, it's really just an open gateway between the outside world, which has every pathogen and microbe you could imagine. On the other side, you have your most important reproductive organs. And we've essentially co-evolved with this community of bacteria that play this really important immune barrier-like function for the reproductive system. And what I mean by that is that when the vaginal microbiome is in a healthy state, it's basically dominated by bacteria like lactobacilli, which maybe people have heard of. And what those bacteria are doing is they produce lactic acid, hydrogen peroxide. They basically make the vaginal environment acidic, which I feel like people know is important, the pH of the vagina. And they also take up space on the vaginal wall. And that way, when pathogens or bad bacteria get into the vagina, they simply cannot survive. It's too acidic, there's no space for them. And so it actually keeps them out of the vaginal environment. But when the vaginal microbiome breaks down, because God forbid you have sex with someone new, you sit in your swimsuit for too long, you have a long period, all of those things can increase the pH of the vagina. And when that happens, those bad guys start to replicate, right? They start to make a home for themselves. They start to push out the good guys. And that's when we go to the doctor with these symptoms and infections. But what we're not thinking about is the fact that we've also now lost that barrier for the rest of the reproductive system, right? And now those bad guys can go up. They can cause inflammation and infection in the rest of the reproductive tract. And what you see is much higher rates of everything from infertility to IVF failure to preterm birth to miscarriage to cervical cancer progression to STI acquisition to endometriosis relapse. I mean, you name it. And it's because we're not thinking about the fact that we need to have that barrier in place to protect the rest of the system. And so we're trying to use this data not only to help people with these symptoms, but also to actually proactively manage so many other conditions in women's health.
I'm so amazed at the way you're able to break that down. And it's just so important. So many people do not understand that we even have a vaginal microbiome. And so I'm so
Totally.
thrilled that we're bringing awareness to this today. Okay, so now that we've covered the vaginal microbiome, and we will be going back there, I want to talk a little bit about how you got here. So, at the Chronic Boss Summit last year, you talked about your own experience being a patient of the healthcare system one too many times, was, I believe, the way you put it. So, tell me more about your experience with chronic conditions.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start by saying that I have had a variety of different kind of like autoimmune issues throughout my life. It was probably in 2020. So it was right before I left my job to start Evvy, where I was dealing with like really extreme symptoms, right? And I mean, I'll share on this podcast, I had lost half my hair. It was very distressing, obviously, emotionally. There's a lot of identity tied up in that. And anyways, it was brutal. And I had gone to every doctor you could imagine. I had done every test you could imagine. I live in New York. I went to everyone on earth. And I remember drawing like 30 tubes of blood. And my doctor called me and was like, "You have the most perfect results I've seen in a year." And I was like, how in the world can every biomarker that you're tracking tell you that I'm doing amazing? And you look at me and like clearly something is so wrong. And what that screamed to me was like, okay, whatever you're measuring is clearly not predictive of whatever's going on in my body because something is extremely wrong. You've tried everything to measure it and you can't measure it. And I think it was just this incredible frustration of like, it doesn't matter what specialist you go to. It doesn't matter, even if the doctor listens to you and believes you and can see you and see the problem, like they just did not have the tools to help me get better. And I think I started doing my own research and I was just, struck by communities like what the community you've built, right? Of just how many women it felt like we could not get answers at the doctor's office. And as I did more research, that was when I found out that women weren't in clinical research in the US until 1993 and that we are diagnosed so much later and that all of the paradigms of medicine are based on men. And I was like, oh, one, this is not a me problem. So like, thank God. And two, I was like, wow, this is so horribly depressing, but also there is an opportunity, right? There is an opportunity to focus on data that's specific to women and the biomarkers that are unique to us. Because, oh, wow, imagine what we could do if we did focus on those things, right? What if we could better diagnose disease in women? What if we could better treat women? What if we could actually predict risk before things happened, right? And so I think a story probably very similar to so many people in your community of just feeling so frustrated by the inability to get answers. And while I wanted support, I wanted community, I wanted to be listened to, I also fundamentally just wanted diagnostics and treatments that worked. And I felt like there was no way to get there without doing the basic research.
Yeah, it's incredible. So your personal experience was a tipping point for you starting Evvy.
100%. Yes. It was like, okay, I can't sit in my job anymore. And I was working at an AI company. My background was in data. And I was sitting there being like, how can we predict everything, measure everything in this world? I mean, especially today in 2025, all anyone wants to talk about is AI. And I'm like, okay, well, how is that going to work if we have no data on women? Tell me what the plan is.
Yes. And so what was your decision? You touched on this a little bit, but why the vagina? Why did you
Yeah.
start there?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I laugh. I'm like, now all I think about is the vaginal microbiome. But back then, 5 years ago, maybe even more than that now, I had left my job with the hypothesis that there were these under-leveraged female biomarkers, right? This idea that like we weren't paying attention to them, but they actually were really predictive. And I was interviewing tons of scientists, doctors, patients, trying to figure out kind of what was at the trifecta of patient need, doctors looking for better solutions and where there were promising things kind of sitting in the research. And honestly, I could not escape the vaginal microbiome. It was like, from a patient perspective, always in the top 3 most frustrating experiences that they have in the healthcare system. Doctors were all like, we have no idea how to manage these conditions. None of the tools work. Like, please help me, which I feel like is rare in healthcare to have that response from the healthcare
Mhm.
system. And then the research was mind blowing. I mean, I look at the study and I understand the flaws that it has in it. But when I read it 5 years ago, there was basically a study on like 35 women looking at using the vaginal microbiome to predict whether or not a cycle of IVF would succeed. And for anyone who doesn't know, IVF cycles on average succeed like 30% of the time. Like which is crazy because they're $15,000. And I read this study that said that just looking at the vaginal microbiome, not taking into account age, number of past cycles, anything else, they could predict whether the cycle could succeed with 94% accuracy. And I was literally like, in what world are we not using that data? And then I put together like, oh, this is also the cause of the number 1 reason women go to the doctor, and also plays this huge role in preterm birth, and is also the leading symptom of menopause. And I was just sitting there like, how? I remember having to be like, am I sure I'm not missing something? Like, why? How could nobody have already done this? Right? We've seen a proliferation of gut microbiome tests and human genome tests. And I was like, is there something I'm missing? And then I was like, I guess that nobody had raised money for a like for a company to do that for the vagina. So it was just truly white space.
Oh my God. You are like the Nancy Drew of the vaginal microbiome. I love it. That's unbelievable. Okay. So that study, only 35 women.
Yes.
Let's talk about the fact that you've now developed the largest data set that exists on the vaginal microbiome.
Yes, which is obviously, I mean, if you can't tell from the conversation to date, I'm such a data nerd. I'm so excited to finally have data on female bodies. But we today work with over 75,000 patients, over 2,000 doctors across the country. And when people use our platform, one of the first things we ask is if they are interested in opting into research. And what we see is that over 98% of our patients actively consent to research, which I think is just mind blowing. And so what that means is that now we can finally study these biomarkers in the vaginal microbiome that, I mean, let's just say the government's not funding that research today, right?
No.
Nobody's looking at, can we identify biomarkers for preterm birth or biomarkers for endometriosis diagnostics or PCOS diagnostics? And one of the things that I love so much about our community is that I literally get emails every day from patients saying, what else can I tell you so that my daughter, my sister doesn't have to go through what I did? And I think it's so powerful and speaks to the community you've built around like the people who want the system to change the most are the patients. They are the women. And when you actually give them the power to contribute, you're like, we are going to change this industry faster than it was ever going to change in any other way. And it's only thanks to the patients who actually came to Evvy themselves.
Yeah, they came and they show up. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too, this incredible community you've built. I would like to know on the data front to what extent you can share, because I'm sure you've got
Yeah.
all kinds of different trials and studies going on. Is there anything really landmark, interesting, something surprising that the data has revealed thus far?
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, one, just like the clinical understanding of vaginal health today is in medieval times. I'm like, we are so rudimentary in our understanding of what's actually happening in a patient's vagina when they have symptoms, when they have negative health outcomes, that frankly, I'm just like new age technology just sheds a light on things in a way that we could not before. And yeah, basically all that to say, like the current way that we understand what bacterial vaginismus is, why it happens, how it's different in different people, like the whole concept of BV in my mind has been completely changed once you actually see the data across these tens of thousands of patients. So that's definitely one. And then two, I think honestly, I am pleasantly surprised at how predictive vaginal microbiome markers alone can be of different women's health conditions. So whether it's, is a woman in menopause or not? Is a woman likely to have an endometriosis diagnosis or a PCOS diagnosis or an infertility diagnosis? I am like pretty amazed. I mean, look, we haven't frankly had the time or the money to invest as much as I want to in those models and those arenas to develop real tools that can be used yet. But the initial data is pretty mind blowing. So I'm very excited about that.
That's huge. That is music to my ears. I know that is music to the ears of so many women out there, because how often are we hearing about PCOS and endometriosis and all of these conditions that impact women, and that they are dismissed
Yes.
and they are gaslit at the doctor's office? And if you could have a diagnostic tool that's going to say, "Oh, hey, let's look at her vaginal microbiome," I don't think she's faking her symptoms. I think that might
Totally.
be real,
What
right?
is the average time to diagnosis? Like 7 to 10 years?
In the autoimmune space, it's up to 7 years that folks are taking to get to a proper diagnosis. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that you brought up earlier, 80% of people living with autoimmune diseases are women, and we are dismissed in the doctor's
Totally.
office and we are gaslit. And so there's so much work to be done. And I'm always excited when I hear about data and tools and diagnostics that are going to help us say, okay, you don't want to listen to my symptoms, you don't want to listen to what I have to say, take a look. Let's run the
Yeah.
test and let's take a look at it, and
Yeah.
let's get me diagnosed
No,
and get the help that I need, right?
that makes me think of another stat that I saw, which is I think it's something like 70% of healthcare decisions are based on a lab test. And I think what's so fascinating about that is that we don't have lab tests in women's health. Like almost none of the disease areas that we talked about are diagnosed with lab tests. One of our advisors has this great line about how everything in women's health is a storytelling diagnostic, where like you tell your story to the doctor who tries to pattern match the story to other patients. And it's like, if the majority of medical decisions are made with lab tests and we don't have lab tests for women's health, I mean, are we surprised that we
Yeah.
can't diagnose anything? It's like, it's just, we don't understand the female body molecularly. And because we don't understand that, then how are we going to have solutions? And I'm just like, so, I mean, I will only say this once because it's too depressing, but you're just like, the fact that we are choosing to cut back our investment in science and research in the United States is, I think, one of the worst decisions we could ever make. And then obviously, we're disproportionately doing that for anything related to women. And I think that we're going to feel the pain of that for decades.
And we're already so behind. Women are so behind already. When you talk about the stat of 1993, women
Yeah.
couldn't be in clinical trials until then, and we still struggle with to today pregnant women, and where do they fall, and what medicines can they take when they're pregnant? I mean, we just don't have this data, and it's scary. And you're right, it is scary that we're starting to see those cuts. And I will say, I am so grateful that we have companies like yours and people like you who continue to push this forward and are driving innovation in the private sector, because we need it now more than ever.
Totally. It's like we can't rely on the public sector anymore. Like, I'm
No.
not waiting, right? Like, we can't wait anymore. It's not going to happen. And we need to build a women's healthcare progress machine that is resilient to whatever the politics and whatever the public sector is going to do, because they clearly do not show up for us.
Nope, nope, they don't. But you're paving the way. You're making it happen. You are making it happen. And so you mentioned previously, you talked a little bit about the community, a little bit about these women who are pushing. They're like
Yeah.
knocking that door to say, hey, I want to share my data, take my data, analyze it. Let's get this problem solved. So you built this amazing community, and I am a proud member of your Facebook group. I've also used Evvy I've done a number of kits to examine my vaginal microbiome and figure out what's going on.
I love to hear.
It's a remarkable program. I'm obsessed with it. So what's really interesting is that you've created this space for women to support and empower one another and give each
Yeah.
other information. It's no gatekeeping. It's like, okay, I'm struggling with this. What have you done when you've been in this scenario? But what you can also see is that there is this extreme mental toll, which I can relate to, because the toll that I went through when I was trying to deal with all of my recurrent UTIs and vaginal infections, it messed with my head. I was so devastated by it. And you see that in this group that
Yeah.
you created. It's ruining their mental health. Tell me what you've learned from this community. What are you
Yeah.
seeing? What are they talking about? What are they sharing? Where are the greatest challenges?
Oh, such a big question. I mean, I think that fundamentally what you said it well, actually. It's like vaginal health is mental health, right? Like
Mm,
when people's vaginal health is suffering, I think what you see is it plays such a large role in one, your own self-esteem, your willingness to go to work, your willingness to engage with the world, your willingness to go on a date or to have sex with your partner or whatever it is. It plays, and those things like they really take a toll on you and what you feel like you can do in the world. And I think it's so heartbreaking. I mean, the stories of women whose husbands have left them, or, I mean, it's just like, it's unbelievably just distressing how much vaginal health affects mental health. And then when you think about what women are given at the doctor's office, you're like, I mean, this is just, it's abysmal.
They
So,
don't have answers. And even doctors, again, when I was going through this process, I many times felt that I was educating all of the doctors that I was seeing. I said,
yes.
"Oh, well, I've tried this supplement and I'm doing this because I've heard that this works well." And they said, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard about that."
Right. Which you're like, look, to it's not their fault that we don't teach these things in medical school, that guess who educates them constantly? Pharma companies and diagnostic companies
Mhm.
that come knocking on their door saying, use my product. And guess what those companies aren't investing in? Vaginal health. And so we just don't have the infrastructure for our doctors to be well educated on these things. I mean, frankly, like the research on the vaginal microbiome isn't that old, right? So if you went to medical
Mhm.
school 30 years ago, chances are the words vaginal microbiome had never been put together before. It's like so anyways, all that to say, I think that the experience when you go to the doctor is even more distressing for so many of these patients that are already distressed. I think that two things. One, I think that patients, the way that they show up for each other and support each other and share their knowledge, and anytime something works, the support the cheering they get from the community, the willingness to share. I mean, you see this in your community. It's like, I think that is just so amazing and speaks to just volumes about the kindness and the like wanting to share and be connected in that way, which I think is just phenomenal. And then two is like, women are wise. So many of these patients have actually found things that worked, and their doctors keep telling them, that doesn't work. The research says that doesn't work. And one of the things that drives me literally insane is the way that the entire scientific and medical community conflate the idea that the research has shown it doesn't work versus we haven't studied it. And almost everything in vaginal health is in the latter category, meaning we haven't studied it. But what doctors say to patients is it doesn't work. There's no data to say it works. But then what you're seeing is in these communities, these women are saying, no, 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 this worked for me. And this test found this thing, and this, when I did this, it worked. And what I love about Evvy is the fact that we can finally put data and studies behind the things that women in these communities have been saying for so long, so that finally we can be like, no, 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 we actually have 10,000 patients who have done that and shown that it works. And now we don't have to say anymore, there's no research on that. And so I think those are the two parts of the community that get me extremely excited.
It's really exciting. And what a beautiful concept that you have all of these women who are empowering one another to
Yes.
get answers. And then they're supporting the collective world in learning about the vaginal
Yes.
microbiome and
Yes.
driving innovation forward. It's just, again, like, what can't women do when we all come together?
I
It's
mean,
such a perfect example of that. It's such a perfect example.
completely agree.
Okay, so shifting gears just a little bit, because I think it's really important that we touch on this. At Chronic Boss, we're all about talking about powerful women like yourself who are living with chronic conditions and who are making an impact and who are like knocking down doors, shattering glass ceilings. You've built an amazing company that is venture backed. So you've also openly talked about imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
not being a doctor or a PhD, but you are a leader in this space. So how do you reframe not having that background as a strength?
Totally, absolutely. I feel very, if anyone is feeling that way, I would just like to say I still feel that way. I think it's really, I'll talk about the vaginal microbiome or about vaginal health or about Evvy, and someone will say, well, are you the doctor? Are you the PhD? Or what letters do you have after your name? And I don't even have an MBA. So, like, I don't even got those letters after my name. But I think that when I was starting Evvy, I think I was extremely insecure about that. I think, it's still something I can't say that I'm perfect at. Like, I think it's still hard for me to hear those questions, especially when I think I've probably stared at more vaginal microbiome data than like maybe anyone on this earth. But I think that what I remind myself often is that there are so many roles to play in pushing the system forward. And the expert role is an extremely important one, right? Like, you need the doctors, you need the scientists, you need the people who know how to run a shotgun metagenomics assay, and the people who know how to build bioinformatics pipelines to analyze genetic data. Like, of course, you need those people. But you also need people who understand the patient and who know how to talk about the problem in a way that brings resources to it. and who can hire talent to focus on it, right? And I think that I remind myself, one, I don't need to be the expert. I'm not the expert on a lot of things, and that's like totally fine. And two, it's like my expertise is that women deserve better. And I have been a patient of the system, and I can tell you as a consumer what I expect from the healthcare system. I can raise capital and hire people to focus on this problem that maybe they never would have focused on before. Maybe we wouldn't have spent $25 million investing in the vaginal microbiome if we hadn't chosen to do this, right? And I think it's accepting that like that is also an important role to play, and that the only important roles aren't just the technical expertise, but there's also so much more that it takes to actually bring something to life. And I think that so much of healthcare would benefit from more women who were patients coming into the space to innovate. And so I think you just have to know that that is actually equally valuable and important for the space to benefit from.
So well said. And might I just add, you speak to the technical piece better than any doctor I've ever seen in this space. And by the way, I'm in Boston, which is, the top medical hub of the world. And you've got it. So maybe you don't have the letters after your name, but I'm not big on that. I'm not big on having to have letters after your name. We grow and we learn through experience. And
Totally.
I love the way that you framed that up. Everyone has something to offer. So what advice would you give to other women founders who maybe feel underestimated in some of the rooms that they're walking into?
I mean, we all feel you, is the first thing I'll say. I mean, I think one, it's so hard to be underestimated. I think two, it's so frustrating to feel like people don't understand how large the problem is that you're trying to solve, or to be told that something is niche, or that is it really that big of a problem? And do people really care about that? So I think it's just remembering like every great company and every great founder has absolutely, that has happened to them, right? They could be a white man, still happening to them, right? And I think it's really, honestly, it's just about picking yourself up. And I think honestly, that's the part of being a founder that I don't think people talk about enough, which is like one of the hardest parts is just picking yourself up every hour of every day, and then you have to pick up your team around you, right? So like sometimes it feels like I need help getting picked up, but like, okay, I got to do that for myself, and then I have to show up for my team. And so I think that it's just realizing that like this job is just the world beating down on you. And I remember somebody saying like startups are default dead, right? So like you are breathing the energy into this. You are creating it. You are pushing it forward. And like that by definition means that like wind is going to be in your face. Things are going to be coming against you. And like, if you can just pick your head up and pick yourself up, like there will be another day. There's always, you know what I mean? Tomorrow comes and you just have to pick yourself up and get there. And I think that like at the end of the day, I know it's so cliche, but it's like resilience wins. And I think that like no one who looks successful is not being punched in the face 100 times a day. And it's just about how many times could they pick themselves up to get to the next challenge.
Resilience. A keyword that we use a lot in Chronic Boss, because anyone who's faced living with a chronic condition, to survive, you really have to develop a resilience, right?
Yeah.
And so that I actually think that that's what makes people living with chronic conditions great entrepreneurs and founders, is that resilience that you've developed over the years.
I love that. I think that is so true. I think that like that is probably where a lot of my resilience came from. It's like you did not ask for this, right? Like we did not ask to be handed a condition that makes us have to like go to therapy for things that like I don't feel like we should have to deal with. And it's like, okay, if we can do that, then we should believe that we can do other hard things too.
Yes. Okay. So how do you balance, as someone who's managing health, managing chronic conditions, managing being a founder? How do you find that balance? How are you taking care of yourself while running this very successful startup?
I mean, we're not very successful yet. We are on our way. We've
in my heart, you are very successful.
That is very kind of you. Look, I will not say I'm perfect. I always laugh. I'm like, the people who run healthcare companies are always the worst patients. The things I will say, I think that you have to choose what really matters to you and then prioritize those things, right? For me, those things are sleep. I'm a huge sleeper. My Aura ring, I love to sleep. I know if I don't sleep, I don't feel good. So like I prioritize that. I go to bed by 9:30 p.m. Like that's important to me. Two is exercise. Like I wake up early and I exercise. I think it makes me much more clear-headed. It makes me a better boss. Like I've taken out my energy somewhere else every morning, which I think is great. And then three is people. Like my friends always say, like, we forget that you run a company. Like I really try to be a part of my friends' lives, prioritize my family. And I think those are the three things that really kind of fill my cup and then give me the space to give so much to Evvy. But like, yeah, I still got to go to the doctor and I need to remember to like order my medications. And I'm sure anyone else on autoimmune journey, it's like so hard to get your medications. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm calling the pharmacy to call my specialist doctor and it feels like its own full-time job. And I feel like I'm lucky that my mom texts me once a week being like, did you follow up on your health stuff this week? Are you sure you're taking care of that? Because I think it can be hard to remember to prioritize, but it's also like, if you go back to what I said earlier, which is like, our job is to pick ourselves up and pick our team up. If we aren't taking care of ourselves, then we can't do that, right? And the company can't survive.
I'm obsessed with that answer. That is what everyone should be doing. We're twinning in some ways on that answer. I'm also big on sleep. I'm obsessed with sleep. My fiance, our first date was at 7:30 on a Monday. He booked it for 7:30 and I was like, this is so late. I need my sleep. And he's learned
7:30 on a weekday?
Isn't that terrible?
Wow. He's lucky that you went.
He didn't want to buy me dinner because you don't know if you're gonna really like the person, so you just want to have drinks. And 7:30 is painful. I remember I was dragging myself to this date. Now he knows that I love an early bird special, like 5 o'clock dinner, obsessed, in bed by 10,
Yes.
love it. Go get a drink after.
Also,
Anyway,
the amount more you recover in your sleep if you eat dinner earlier. That was one of my biggest learnings for my Aura ring, which is like, wow, I need to leave the office, eat dinner early, and finish work from home because my sleep is 5 times more productive.
Yes, sleep is everything. And if you can't be doing things too late, that's why I also work out in the morning so I don't like get myself all riled up and excited and not able to sleep. So yes, and this is becoming an ad for Aura Ring, but I'm also big on Aura. We'll take your sponsor or sponsorship, Aura.
Totally.
Truly. Okay. Great advice. I think that's something that honestly, anyone, whether you're living with a chronic condition or not, all of those are just something that we should do to stay balanced and stay healthy. Okay. So as we think about Evvy, creating community, how important do you think that this connection and this solidarity is in changing women's health outcomes?
You mean between patients and between
Everyone, between all of us?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it, right? Because at the end of the day, like, first of all, again, to pick yourself up, like you need community, you need solidarity, you need to feel like you're not alone. I think community is a huge reason that I have been, successful myself. I think it's a huge reason that Evvy has been successful as a company. And I think that like, this is cliche also, but like our voices are so much louder together. And I think it's really hard to, like when we were starting Evvy, there were absolutely doctors who were like, we don't need this. Women are fine. The standard of care works. You're going to make women hysterical if you give them this information. Like, you name it, we heard it. But now it's like a lot harder to say that when we work with almost 100,000 patients, right? It's a lot because I wouldn't have 100,000 patients if the system was working, right? And so I think that just remembering like you pursuing better health for yourself and not, letting the system tell you it's okay, that actually is pushing the system forward. Because like you can vote with your dollars and with your time and with your voice. And the more people we have doing that, the more we can build a system that actually works for us.
Yes. And you've done an amazing job, not only creating community, but partnering with other organizations who are making an impact, like Society for Women's Health Research and some of the other women's health startups. You have I want to make sure I get this right, Closing the Gender Health Gap Research Day.
So on June 10th, every year, we basically made up a holiday. A really fun marketing tactic. It's called Equal Research Day. Our concept was basically like equal pay day, but for the gender health gap that exists in medical research. And June 10th is the anniversary of when the NIH passed the Revitalization Act in 1993, which was the first time that women were required in research. And so we celebrate that every year as a, thank God that happened, but also there's so much more to do. And that holiday, we raise money for a variety of different organizations. The Foundation for Women's Health Research, they actually directly fund women's health research through some really exciting grants. WHAM, which helps fund a lot of reports that show the impact of investing in women's health. And then the Society for Women's Health Research, which is the original. They really advocate for women's health funding at the federal level. So we love being able to support them.
We love them. And shout out to Katie Schubert at Society for Women's Health Research. Adore her. And so, okay, we definitely want everyone to be getting involved in Equal Research Day. What do you think? What's your advice to listeners on how they can break the silence about vaginal health, just even in their own circles?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think just as you probably encourage people to do about all of their conditions, I think just talking about it without being like ashamed, right? I think you and
Mhm.
I are doing that right now. You can say the word vagina, you can say bacterial vaginosis. I mean, I can't tell you how many women I talk to who have never heard of bacterial vaginosis, but they've had it, but they didn't. But because the symptoms are odor and these things that they're so ashamed of, they've never put two and two together that, like, oh, that was a healthcare problem that I should have dealt with, right? I remember one of
Mhm.
our advisors saying, we got to get doctors to say vagina with the same comfort level that they say elbow. And she was talking about doctors, so let alone people, right? And I think that we can normalize these conditions when we talk about them like healthcare conditions, which is what they are, and stop letting the system tell us that things are in our head.
Isn't that crazy that even doctors can't say vagina?
Yes. This is
What
a doctor at Harvard who said to me that doctors like shrink when they have to talk about vaginas at conferences.
it drives me bananas.
It's crazy.
And I'm glad we're talking about this. And I hope that for anyone that's listening to this podcast, you will open up lines of conversation. You will legitimately be, I promise you, when you bring this up with a group of women, there will be other women who
Yes.
raise their hand and say, oh my God, me too. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm so glad you said something. You literally feel, I said at the beginning, you feel this collective sense of relief that other people are going through this. And now you have somebody you can talk to about it. And now we can help one another and have conversations. Oh, did you ask your doctor about this? Have you considered trying this? Did you join the Evvy research group? Go get your microbiome tested. It's up to us to have these
Totally.
conversations. It's up to us.
Totally. I
Yeah.
literally get cornered at every single dinner party I go to now, being like, oh, can I actually ask you about this problem I've been having? Or like, do you know what this means? And I'm like, it makes me so happy that I'm like, oh, I've become this safe space for so many women that they've never had before. So I think that we can all do that. We can all be experts on our own vaginal microbiomes with Evvy, and then we can educate our friends.
We can too. Yeah, Priyanka, I will tell you, in my circles, I have become the go-to gal on vaginas.
Yes.
Now, I don't have the same credentials as you, though.
I
I
mean,
can,
I don't have any credentials, as we
you
discussed
you
earlier.
you have basically an honorary MD, PhD in the
No.
vaginal microbiome, but that's fine. No, you're amazing, and this has been incredible. This was packed with so much good information that honestly every woman should know. And there's so much we can all do collectively together, and so we need to team up to get there.
I could not agree more. Thank you so, so much for having me and for
Thank you.
everything
Oh,
you're doing.
Priyanka, I can't let you go yet. I
Okay,
have to
tell me.
ask you one more question.
Please.
What does being a chronic boss mean to you?
What a great question. I think it means picking yourself up. It means that you are the type of person who is chronically hit with something that you didn't ask for, and you pick yourself up and you have another day. And I think that the people who do that, they are the bosses in my mind.
Amazing way to end. Priyanka, thank you for being here and thank you for all that you do for women's health and our community. You are literally changing the world, and it is an honor to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you and to get this information out to chronic bosses everywhere.
You are far too nice. Thank you so much for having me and for everything you're doing with your amazing community.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on this episode of Chronic Boss Unfiltered. But there are so many other ways we can stay connected. Head to chronicboss.com to access free resources, explore our membership, and join the community. You'll find all the links you need in the episode notes below. If this episode spoke to you, send it to a friend who gets it. Leave us a review or hit that follow button so you never miss a moment. Thank you for spending this time with us. Cheers to you, your health, and your wealth. See you next time.